I, 34F, have been married to my husband Jake, 36M, for 5 years now. We have a pretty good relationship overall, but there's been one constant thorn in my side, his family. Specifically, his mother Diane, 62F, father Richard, 65M, and sister Megan, 38F. For context, I didn't have the smoothest path growing up. My parents divorced when I was 12, and I spent my teenage years rebelling pretty hard. Nothing criminal, but I definitely went through a phase, partying, dating questionable guys, dropping out of college for a year before eventually getting my act together. I turned things around at 22, finished my degree in accounting, and built a successful career. I met Jake at 28 when I was already established in my career and had long moved past my rebellious years. He came from a very different background, upper middle class, private schools. Everyone in his family has advanced degrees and respectable careers. They're the type of family that has professional photos taken every Christmas wearing matching outfits. From the beginning, his family made subtle digs about my background. At first, it was questions that seemed innocent but felt loaded. So your parents divorced? That must have been hard. Or you took a gap year during college. How interesting. Over time, it became more direct. At every family gathering for the past 5 years, someone inevitably brings up something from my past. They'll casually mention that time I dropped out of college, or ask if I still talk to those wild friends from my party days. Jake usually stays quiet during these exchanges, and when I've brought it up privately, he tells me they're just making conversation, and I'm being too sensitive. The breaking point came last weekend at Diane and Richard's anniversary dinner. 15 people were gathered around their formal dining table when Megan started telling a story about how she ran into one of my old boyfriends from my wild phase. He remembered you quite well, she said with a smirk. Said you were quite the party girl back then. The table went quiet, and I could feel everyone's eyes on me. Jake stared at his plate, saying nothing as usual. Something inside me just snapped. After 5 years of snide comments and thinly veiled judgment, while my husband sat by and did nothing, I decided I was done being their punching bag. You know what, Megan? You're right. I did go through a rebellious phase. Unlike some people at this table, I don't pretend my past didn't happen. I could see the shock on their faces. No one had ever challenged their perfect family narrative before, and I was just getting started. I took a deep breath and looked around the table. Diane was already clutching her pearls, literally. She was wearing them, and Richard had that stern look he gets when someone disrupts his perfect world. Since we're all so interested in discussing the past, I continued, why don't we talk about some other interesting history, like how Uncle David over there had to suddenly transfer colleges his junior year. Uncle David, Richard's brother, nearly choked on his wine. I discovered through old newspaper archives that he'd been involved in a hazing scandal that got swept under the rug thanks to his father's connections and a sizable donation to the university. Or maybe we could discuss how cousin Emily's first wedding was actually her second wedding, but the family pretends the Vegas elopement never happened because her ex-husband was, gasp, a carpenter without a college degree? Emily's face turned bright red. Her parents had paid good money to hide all evidence of that first marriage. But public records are public records if you know where to look. What about the summer Megan spent studying abroad that was actually rehab for her Adderall addiction? All those perfect grades came at quite a price, didn't they? Megan slammed her hand on the table. How dare you? That's completely private, personal, something you'd rather not have brought up at dinner? Funny, that's exactly how I feel every time you bring up my past. The silence was deafening. Jake was staring at me with his mouth open. I turned to face my in-laws directly. Or should we talk about how Richard had to marry Diane because she was already pregnant with Jake? I did the math on your anniversary and his birthday. Interesting that you judge me for my wild days when you were doing exactly the same things, just without social media to document it. Diane's face had lost all color. This is outrageous. Jake, are you going to let her speak to your family this way? Jake finally found his voice, but not in the way I expected. How do you know all this stuff? I sighed. Unlike your family, Jake, I actually took an interest in learning about my in-laws. I listened when your great-aunt Martha had too much wine at Christmas 3 years ago and started reminiscing. I noticed the dates on old family photos. I paid attention when your cousins argued about family history. And yes, I did some research when I got curious about certain gaps in stories. Richard stood up, his face purple with rage. I think it's time for you to leave. Gladly, I replied, placing my napkin on the table. But just so we're clear, I'm not ashamed of my past. I worked hard to overcome challenges and become who I am today. Can all of you say the same? Or are you still hiding behind this facade of perfection? I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. Jake followed me, hissing, what the hell was that? I turned to face him in the foyer, away from the dining room, but still within earshot of his stunned family. That was me finally standing up for myself after 5 years of subtle put-downs and judgment. That was me being done with sitting silently while your family treats me like I'm somehow less worthy because I didn't grow up in your privileged bubble. Jake's face was a mask of confusion and anger. You had no right to embarrass my family like that, he whispered harshly. And they had no right to embarrass me for 5 straight years, I replied, keeping my voice steady. Why is it okay for them to bring up my past, but not okay for me to mention theirs? Before Jake could answer, Diane appeared in the hallway, her makeup slightly smudged from dabbing at tears. Jake, are you coming back inside? Your father is very upset. I looked between my husband and his mother, suddenly seeing everything with perfect clarity. That's your choice, Jake. Go comfort them if you want. I'm going home. I walked out to my car alone and drove home in silence, a strange sense of calm washing over me. For the first time in 5 years, I had spoken my truth in that house. Whether it destroyed my marriage or saved it remained to be seen. Jake didn't come home that night. Around midnight, I got a text saying he was staying at his parents' house to help them process. I slept surprisingly well, feeling like a weight had been lifted. The next morning, I woke up to several missed calls, not from Jake, but from Megan, Emily, and surprisingly, Great Aunt Martha. I ignored them all and made myself breakfast, wondering what my next steps should be. Around noon, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Jake's father Richard standing there, looking uncomfortable but less angry than the night before. May I come in? He asked stiffly. I nodded and led him to the living room. He declined my offer of coffee and sat rigidly on the edge of the sofa. What you did last night was inappropriate, he began, then paused. But perhaps not entirely unwarranted. I sat silently, waiting for him to continue. Our family has always valued appearances, perhaps to a fault. He cleared his throat. Jake told us this morning that he's been ignoring how we treat you, and that he should have stepped in years ago. Yes, he should have, I agreed. We've never had anyone challenge us quite like you did, Richard continued. It was uncomfortable, but maybe some discomfort was necessary. He looked directly at me. I won't pretend we're going to change overnight, but I can promise we will try to be more respectful of boundaries. After Richard left, Jake finally came home. He looked like he hadn't slept. I'm sorry, were the first words out of his mouth. I've been a coward, letting them treat you that way. I was so used to keeping the peace in my family that I didn't stand up for the family I chose. We talked for hours. Really talked, maybe for the first time, about his family dynamics and the insecurities behind their perfect facade. Jake admitted he'd always felt pressure to maintain their image of success and had unconsciously expected me to do the same. That was 2 days ago. Since then, I've received awkward but seemingly genuine apology texts from both Diane and Megan. Emily actually called to thank me. Apparently, bringing her first marriage into the open has led to some healing conversations with her parents. Jake and I are looking into couples therapy. I don't know if his family will truly change, but at least everything is out in the open now. No more whispers, no more subtle digs. So, Reddit, did I go too far? Maybe. But sometimes you have to break something to fix it properly. And for the first time in 5 years, I feel like I can breathe freely around my in-laws, because the worst has already happened. They've been exposed as the imperfect, messy humans they truly are, just like me.